Alright, guys, I apologized last time for the jump scare. Grab a blanket, turn off your lights.
Mom, there's someone under my bed. So after being hooked on this thread for the past few days, I decided to post my own story when I was 5 or 6 years old. The story starts in the summer circa 1990 in a Dallas suburb. As a child and still today, I was very whimsical and didn't pay much attention to anything that didn't concern me in the moment. It was a summer day and I was playing in the backyard. My mom had to run some errands, so of course I stalled and waited till she was walking out of the front door until I finally dragged ass to join her. "Did you shut the sliding door?" she asked. Not remembering or caring at all, I said yes, and about our day we went. We arrived home sometime early evening around 6. As we enter the house, the sliding door is wide open. Of course, my mom scolds me, and me truly not remembering apologize and go about my business. As the night winds down, my mom tucks me in and goes downstairs to run a bath. So like any 5-year-old, the last thing I do is go to sleep. As I lay on my bed playing with micro machines and making goofy kid noises, I feel my bed move slightly. I immediately pause and look around. I quickly dismiss it and go about my usual kid business. A few minutes later, the end of my bed lifts up and slams back down. Of course, I did what any 5-year-old would do and scream like a fucking banshee. Then in the dark room, my bed starts moving, and a shadow slowly tries to rise from the foot of my bed. I stood up and Olympic jumped all the way to the door and meet my mom mid-stairs. As I hysterically tell my mom what happened, we run to the kitchen and quietly call 911. We kept it short and ran to the car and waited outside for the police. As we wait, we see my upstairs light turn on, then the hallway, then the stairway. After a minute, the police came screeching in. They flew in the house and searched it to no avail. The cops said we probably walked in as the intruder was trying to rob the place, although nothing was touched or disturbed. Needless to say, I didn't sleep in my room for a month, and now every time I get home at night, I always turn on every light and check every crevice. Thanks a lot, creepy burglar. I hope we do meet again, 'cause I would beat the shit out of you. The Extra Tenant. My brother's fiancée, Laura, worked as a landlord for a small apartment complex in downtown Milwaukee, a nice neighborhood. However, the apartment was a bit of a dump. She and my brother were currently going through medical school, so free vacancy was a great deal for them. We had dealt with a normal array of tenants: smelly rooms, bed bugs, noisy past hours, the usual. However, one day, she had a strange occurrence with a potential tenant. A lady rang her and asked if a certain room number was for rent. Laura thought it was oddly specific, but said they did have vacancy, just not in that room. The old lady explained that she used to live there and was hospitalized a while back. She left her apartment lease as she thought she'd be hospitalized for longer. Laura set up a time to look at other apartments in the complex and hung up. She then called her manager and discussed the old lady. Hastily, the manager said to decline the visit and to turn her elsewhere, as she was asked to leave, not hospitalized, for not following the rules of the complex. Apparently, she hadn't been paying, and her room stunk up the entire floor. Laura agreed, called her back later that week, and canceled, citing all the rooms were booked up. Note, many of the workers that helped out the landlords were intercity college kids, and not the most responsible kind. Laura said her job was a bit like babysitting, making sure that the cleaners and people that turned over the rooms would stay on track and get all the rooms ready for occupancy. So fast forward 2 months later, Laura is showing a few rooms off to some new tenants, when all of a sudden a rather large man walked out of his room and asked to speak to Laura when she had a chance. He was very calm and just said he was having issues with his room because Laura Still, with the new potential tenants, didn't want to scare them away, she promptly finished the tour and took the man downstairs to talk. The man had said that things in his room were out of place and even appeared missing. Things like his peanut butter and jam looked as if someone had been eating it. She had assured him first off that it wasn't her and that no one else in the apartment complex had keys. He then very calmly said, "I know it wasn't you. It's an elderly woman." She then asked, "How do you know this?" It was at that moment when she realized it was the same room the woman inquired about from before. And about those bumbling college teens who flipped the rooms for the manager, they had forgotten to change the lock. The man then said that twice in the last month, he had woken up to a woman sitting in his chair, which was by his bedside, just watching him all night as he slept. When asked why he didn't do anything about this, he said he was too afraid and just kept pretending to sleep until she left. Once the lock was changed, they never saw her again. However, just the thought of waking up and having someone staring at you in the dark all night still sends shivers. When I was around 9, my neighbor tried to break into my bedroom. So I still remember this happening so vividly. It was terrifying to the point that I had to move rooms as I was too scared to sleep in my original one. So here is the story. It's a long one. The houses in the suburb were back to back, so basically, there was a street, a line if houses, a fence sectioning them off another line of houses, and then their street. The backyards were that touched each other, so you could basically climb your backyard fence and land in your neighbor's backyard. This is important to understand the layout, so I apologize. The house towards the back of the house was the laundry, and then my room with a large glass door leading outside. It had windows on the side, which sat on a concrete side passage that connected the front of the houses to the backyard. My bed was pushed against the wall with the window above and next to it. 9-year-old me was a night owl as a young kid. I used to pretend to go to sleep and wait for all clear, then turn on the lamp and read my books. This particular night, it was so windy, you could hear the dry leaves being blown up and down the side passage. It was around midnight when I heard the leaves shifting and moving around outside, a lot quicker than before. Assuming the wind had picked up, I kept reading. The noise was growing louder and louder, and it seemed to stop right by my window. The house is an older house and is on stilts, so my window would have been 2 to 3 feet off the ground. I heard a bang against the wall, then a scraping noise. I froze sitting in bed as that noise came from right behind me. I panicked as the scraping was more and more frequent, and I turned the lamp off and did what every child would do in that situation. I retreated under the covers and hid while listening. My heart was pounding. I can still feel the fear till this day. The noise stopped, and I heard the crunching on the leaves as whatever it was walking away. I was trying to gather the courage to run to my parents' room, which was at the front of the house, but that meant I had to walk past the glass door. Then, I heard a thump up the stairs to the back door, then the clamoring of the wind chimes. They were metal and hung low. Whoever it was could not see it in the dark and must have knocked them as they were peering in the door. I heard them grab it and throw them on the ground. This was followed by tapping and scratching, and they even tried the door handle. I screamed to high heaven, hoping Dad would wake up. I heard the person clamber away. I got up and ran to my parents' room. Woke up Dad in a panic, declaring someone is outside. He took off with a baseball bat and no pants like the knight in shining armor he was. I don't know how long it was, but he came back and told me he could not find anybody, and that I should go back to bed. I refused and slept in the lounge room that night. It got to a point where I was so unsettled, my parents had to shift all the rooms around to move me from that room. It was only years later, when I was 20 years old, we were at family dinners, and we were talking about things we did when we were young. I brought up that story. My dad turns to me and says, "Since we don't live there anymore, I guess I can tell you that I did find someone that night. He was our neighbor Bill, whom was the father of one of my friends from school. He was trying to climb over the fence when my dad caught him, and the first thing he said to my dad was, 'Oh, did something make her scream?' Dad refused to tell me what happened after that, but that line still chills me to this day. He found his ladder on its side near my window in the morning, which of course he did not tell me about, either, as the creep was trying to climb into my room." Someone under my bed. I just discovered this subreddit and realized it's time to talk about what happened to me 2 years ago. I created a throwaway account because I'm not really comfortable revealing my identity after writing about this. I am a 25-year-old female. I was 23 years old at the time this took place. I had been a college student, but had to quit due to a major surgery in my leg, so I was unemployed and had spent months just recovering. I was finally off crutches but still limping around. I lived and still live in an old Victorian 2-story house that is now a duplex. I live on the ground floor, and a middle-aged reclusive woman occupies the whole second floor. There are separate outside entrances. I live with a male housemate that was also a friend that is a few years older than me and was employed as a security guard at a local casino. Our street is known for being seedy and not a good neighborhood, but I've always felt pretty safe and never had much trouble. One night, I was home with my roommate and my boyfriend, and we were watching movies in the living room that is at the front of the house. My roommate's girlfriend then came over drunk with another male friend of ours. The male friend sat down to watch movies with us and immediately passed out, and my roommate and his girlfriend went to his bedroom at the back of the house and immediately started having the most insanely loud sex I've ever heard. She always sounded like the trashiest porn star or hooker I'd ever heard, and the screaming could be heard from the streets outside. A few minutes into their session, my boyfriend and I were still watching movies and heard a loud sound coming from the back of the house. We couldn't distinguish what it was, maybe something getting knocked over, but we figured it was just my roommate and his girlfriend being extremely loud and all over the place. Eventually, they finished, and the house was finally quiet again. Our movie ended, and we decided to go to bed in my room. My room is in the middle of the house and shares a wall with my roommate's room and the living room on the other side. My bed was against the outside wall of my room, parallel to an old window that slides up and down. The side and back of our house are pretty high off the ground. Looking out the window, it's a decent drop to the ground. Outside my window are vertical and horizontal beams that extend to hold up a little back porch balcony for the lady upstairs. It really ruins the view having beams right there. My boyfriend went into my room and took off all his clothes and jumped into my bed. I started to take off my clothes but stopped when I noticed the screen on my open window was missing. I had a cat at the time that was indoor, only so my first thought was the screen is missing. Strega must have gone out the window. Then I noticed that the window was pushed up way more than I thought was possible. I kept thinking of my cat though. I was obsessed with keeping her inside. My first thought was to look under the bed and see if maybe she was under there. It was dark, but I saw a black mass and reached out to grab her. Thankful she was still inside. The black mass wasn't her. It was a black hoodie, and someone was in it. I had grabbed someone's arm. For some reason, my first thought was that my friend was playing a prank on me, and it was probably someone I knew. So I kind of laughed and said, "Hey, there's someone under here." Then I lowered my face to meet the face of the person and realized I had never seen this guy's face before in my life. This was not a friend and not a joke. "I don't know this guy," I said a little less calmly. My boyfriend was completely naked and told me to grab my gun, and I was nearer to the closet than he was. "Stay where you are," he screamed to the mass under the bed. The guy cooperated. I threw my boyfriend a robe and he put it on and jumped out of bed to near the closet where I was. He took the gun and pointed it at the bed and told the guy to come out slowly with his hands out. Since my roommate is a security guard, I ran to wake him up for backup. He rushed into the room and the three of us stood there as a teenage boy wearing a black hoodie came out from under the bed. We were all kind of in shock and started to question the kid, who cooperated with us completely. He was quiet and humble. His eyes shook violently from side to side as if he was high on something. My roommate searched him. We emptied his pockets, and he had condoms, lube, porn advertisements from the back of a dirty magazine, the kind where you can call a number and talk to a woman, and some dirty pills that he told us were Vicodin. He also had a pair of my dirty underwear in his pocket. Dirty underwear that I just had my period all over. That was the most disgusting part. We found an ID on him as well, and a business card for a youth probation officer, so clearly he was a troublemaker. We've also found a piece of paper with names and phone numbers on it that indicated he lived with his mother in a hotel room in a notorious drug motel that catered to prostitutes and meth. His high school ID was from Hoopa High, and he was clearly from the local Hoopa Native American tribe, or at least part Hoopa Native. When we saw he had no weapons, and we started questioning why he was in my bedroom under my bed with all this stuff, and asked him if he realized how serious this was. He quietly replied that he had heard sex from the street and thought he could have some. Basically, he was a horny teenage boy on some sort of drug riding his bike all around at night, and my boyfriend's trashy girlfriend's sex noises were like a siren song in the night to this kid. He was so overcome with his horniness that he scaled the scaffolding and beams near my open window and crawled in under my bed, probably to masturbate to what he was hearing in the next room. He probably jizzed on my underwear. Then he kept apologizing and saying he was sorry and knows it was stupid. I was still shocked and disgusted and wondering if he would have raped me if I had been alone. But we all felt a little compassion for the fucked up kid. His fate was basically in our hands at this point. We debated whether or not to call the police, and finally decided not to. We basically lectured him and told him how lucky he was that he crawled into my window, and not someone else's, because we would have shot him or called the police and had him arrested or whatever, and he was on probation anyways, and it could have been a lot worse. He kept thanking us and was super humble at that point. My roommate then escorted him out of the front door and took his bike that he left on the lawn and walked him to a shitty motel and watched him go inside. We kept all his stuff and made sure to tell him we had his ID, knew where he lived, had his mom's number and his probation officer's number, and that if we ever saw him on the street again, he'd regret it. Our drunk friend and my roommate's girlfriend slept through this entire ordeal, and we had to tell them the next morning what had happened while they slept. I know that I'm going to get a lot of shit from some of you for not calling the police, so I'm going to explain why we didn't. First of all, if I had been alone without my boyfriend there, I definitely would have called the police after defending myself with a gun. That would have been a completely different situation. In this case, though, I had my boyfriend in the room and a male roommate, so we had this kid outnumbered, basically. Secondly, as soon as I discovered the kid, he cooperated and showed no signs of aggression or intent to harm. He did everything we told him to do. Third, upon searching him, even though he had condoms and lube, which are creepy, he had no weapons. This indicated to us that he had no plans of rape or assault. He probably just really wanted the thrill of masturbating under my bed while listening to the sex in the next room. He wasn't a big guy either. He was a little skinny kid that I could have easily overpowered even with my small frame. From the information we found on this kid, he was a neglected, horny teenage boy living with a druggy mom in a shitty motel. And yeah, we felt sorry for him in the end. The fact that he is a Hoopa native also scared us a bit, because people from Hoopa out there are known for violence and gang activity. That made us realize that though we doubted this kid was violent, it's quite possible that his family members are, and either he would get the shit beat out of them by the family, or we would after getting him arrested. In the end, I'm still terrified to keep my window open at all, but I think we handled it well without having to get the police involved. After talking to the kid, I really think he was thankful that we let him go just with a lecture. Having a gun pointed at him the whole time probably scared him enough to realize that it was a serious offense and he won't be repeating again.